Hello and welcome back to The Rusted Brush. Today, I'm going to be trying something a little different from my usual Warhammer content. I'm getting into Saga Age of Chivalry. This is my first real Saga army, and I've decided to go with Condottieri of Milan. I've always loved the later medieval period, especially the 14th and 15th centuries. I think the Italian city-states are very interesting, but they don't get nearly as much coverages as places like England or France. For me, it really started with Medieval II Total War. That game introduced me to the Italian city-states, and I've been hooked on the imagery of flamboyant mercenaries, professional crossbowmen, and bannered knights ever since. If you played the game, you know the Genoese crossbowmen can be the destruction and bane of your campaign. The crossbowmen of Genoa are definitely the most hated unit in Medieval II Total War.
Because he was from Genova.
What's the problem with Genoa?
The north of Italy always have the money and the power. They punish the south since hundreds of years. Even today, they put up their nose at us like we're peasants. I hate the north.
One thing I want to mention is that I'm not 100% sure how to properly pronounce Italian words, so I do apologize for that, and if you are Italian, let me know how I should be pronouncing them. So why Saga? Saga is a wargame where you build a warband out of around 30 models, and every faction has its own unique battle board and playstyle. Age of Chivalry expands the game into the high medieval period, with rules for knights, mercenaries, crossbows, handgunners, and much more. Personally, I really like games with a smaller model size, but not as small as a skirmish game with 15 models at most. And right there in the book, you'll find the Italian Condottieri. The Condottieri were professional soldiers, mercenary captains who sold their services to the highest bidder in the wars between Italian city-states. Unlike the armies of France or England, these were organized contracts for war. The very word condotta means contract. These were professional soldiers whose full-time job was fighting. So why pick the Duchy of Milan in specific? Milan in particular was one of the big players, rich, ambitious, and constantly at war with its neighbors. On the tabletop, they have to have one of their Hearthguard units to be the Familia Ducale, which are a more resilient unit of knights. One of the most famous condottieri was Francesco Sforza. He began as a condottiere leading his own band of mercenaries, and through a mix of battlefield skill and political maneuvering, he eventually became the Duke of Milan in 1450. His rise really shows how important the condottieri were, not just as hired swords, but as power brokers who could shape the politics of medieval Italy. That's part of what makes them such a fascinating army to collect in Saga. They don't just represent soldiers on a battlefield, they represent the whole unique system of warfare and ambition that's very different from knightly ideals we often associate with the medieval period. Now for building the army, my plan is to have a starting warband is to have 2 units of Hearthguard, 2 units of warriors, a unit of levies, and then I might add some mercenary units like Genoese crossbowmen or potentially a cannon. For miniatures, I'll be looking almost exclusively at Perry miniatures for the late medieval Italian look. I picked up the mounted men-at-arms and European mercenaries for this project, and this alone should be enough for the army. Both these kits are awesome, and I finally have an excuse to pick them up and assemble them. They both have plenty of options to mix together, and I really enjoy the booklet that tells you some history and gives you some banners you can use as well. For painting, I'll be focusing on having the knights being unique from one another, while the warriors and levies will have reds, whites, blues, and greens for the colors of Milan and Genoa. I'll be drawing inspiration from period artwork, especially Italian frescoes and manuscripts, but also from medieval Total War, because honestly, the Milan faction designs from that game are still burnt into my head. I already built and painted my commander, which I'll be going over how I painted them right now. I primed them black to start since I'm mostly painting armor. Speaking of, I painted the metal first with AK Natural Steel, and building up brighter and brighter with AK Silver and Scale 75 White Alchemy, and then giving it a thin wash of Nuln Oil. For some color, I wanted yellow and blue. For an undercoat for the yellow, I painted the feathers with AK Orange Brown. Then painting over it with Flash Kits Yellow with a wash of Cassandra Yellow, and then I highlighted that with Flash Kits of Yellow again. For the blues, I used AK French Grey Blue, and slowly went lighter and lighter with highlights by mixing some white into the mix. For the shield, I used the same blue and then painted the rest of the shield white. I then painted a serpent with a black as an outline, and painted it green with AK deep green, and added 2 stripes for some more visual interest. For some weathering, I used the sponge technique on the shield with a dark brown and an enamel wash of AK Earth effects on the lower part of the model. For the base, I added some mud texture and then different flocks of grass and longer strands of reeds. And then I added plenty of different flowers to make the base very vibrant. And that was the model finished. So that's my first steps into Saga Age of Chivalry. I'm excited to dig into the rules, finish painting and assembling this force, and hopefully get some games in soon. If you played Saga before, let me know in the comments what your experience has been, and if you faced or played the Condottieri yourself. And if you're into more overlooked corners of medieval history, I'd love to hear what armies you'd want to see on the tabletop. My next video is going to be a showcase of my German bolt action army, so stay tuned for that. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.